The question is, how can singleness be abused? And to preface it, perhaps we say there are often extremes when it comes to singleness. The pendulum swings to, if you're not single, great. You could just serve the Lord. And you're like Paul, who cares about marriage? Don't worry about pleasing a spouse. And while there's truth there, maybe some people fall into certain traps, or having a lot of freedom leads to abuses. On the other side, there's the, why aren't you married? What's wrong with you? You're 20, 21, you need to get married, have the babies, and
be fruitful.
Be fruitful, multiply. It's a command. Why aren't you fruitful? So how can singleness be abused? Walk us through wisdom.
Yeah, well, I think any period of our life needs to be stewarded. I like that word, steward, because that's everything in our life, our job, our family, our finances. So I think singleness is abused and not stewarded when it's seen as an opportunity to maybe merely get ahead in life, to stack cash, and can also be a catalyst for temptation, indulging, self-serving, cohabitating disobedience.
Okay.
And so I think that would be one of the main reasons why I think at times there's a danger to prolonged periods of singleness, because you can no longer look at it as a strategic season to serve others, but just to serve yourself. Now, I would understand the devil's advocate of there. My brother's an orthopedic surgeon. It would have been hard for him to date or get married during medical school. So I'm not saying that. But I think there's also this justification where you can go, well, I have this and I'm busy, and life becomes so much about maybe what you're trying to accomplish that you can set aside something that is good and beneficial and a blessing from the Lord. So I think one of the ways it's predominantly abused is just when it's seen only through the lens of how it benefits me, rather than viewing your singleness as an opportunity given to you by God to serve extensively, to minister to others. And then over time, you can begin to have this perfect picture of your future spouse in your mind because you've been single for so long. So you start building this picture of the Messiah that you'll marry, or the resurrected Elizabeth Elliot.
So good.
So it's impossible for anyone to ever fit into that mold, because you've been envisioning this perfect person, and then over time you start to add different elements of their personality, their looks, even their social media aesthetic that you think is specifically applicable to you, and you end up looking for someone that doesn't exist, which further perpetuates your singleness. I think it's good to have high standards. So whenever anybody ever makes fun of people that have high standards in marriage, I'm always like, hey, you're gonna spend the rest of your life with them.
Totally.
So you should. Godly character matters. You should be attracted to the person that you'd marry. But sometimes good standards become unrealistic standards when we create this vision of someone that's based on bits and pieces of every different type of individual we like, and then we put that into our dream category. So I think that can be a danger for people. But ultimately, our singleness is, even for people that want to get married that aren't married, they need to view it as a time that the Lord has given them to serve, and then they can also pray without being discontent, God, give me a spouse. So that'd be my brief answer in that regard.
That's so good. Can I ask you to encourage a particular demographic? I meet people in their 30s who are not dating anyone. There aren't any prospects just yet. And maybe it's a single woman or a single man. They're getting into their 30s and they feel like the tunnel is closing in. I'm in my 30s now. I'm 32, I'm 34, I'm 35, or I'm 31. And they get discouraged because they hear all you say and they go, yeah, I've been fruitful, Johnny. I'm definitely focused, and I am content. But there's this part of me that does long for it. I don't think I have the gift of singleness in the sense like Paul. I'm just I'm going to be celibate for my life, or that sense. What would you say to encourage them if you were counseling one of them through that?
Yeah, I think one of the people that's been like an encouragement to me in that regard is the writing of Margaret Clarkson. She's a lifelong single woman who wrote basically and chronicled her desire to be married from 40 to 80.
Wow.
And never was married. And I remember, I'm trying to make sure I get it right, but she says, through no fault or lack of desire on my part, the Lord has never given me a spouse. And she wrote these prayers for years. But she had this line that I'll never forget. She said, God's command is for me to trust him and try to find joy, and his commandments are his enablings, meaning that God has never commanded me to do anything he doesn't enable me to live in obedience to. So even though I want to get married, I pray for a spouse, Sometimes God says yes to prayer, sometimes he says no, and sometimes he says wait, and sometimes he says, we'll see in our own mind. So I think as far as encouraging someone who's in that season, I think there are a lot of people who aren't picky, that want to get married, and that's just not what the Lord has for them. In the same way that there are different people who want children, and children are a gift from the Lord, so that's not something that they necessarily demand from God. That's where we operate in faith and trust. And some things are true in Scripture, but that doesn't necessarily make it easy.